LinkedIn as well if you'd like to come back and review anything. And yeah, welcome. So we're here to talk about the Agile Project and Delivery Management course, which is something that we have delivered for a few years now. And yeah, so let me sort of introduce myself. I've got a co-presenter, Bartwin, who will introduce himself presently as well, and then we'll get into it. Our goal is to finish with at least 10 minutes left, and we'll try and in fact finish the presentation by about 22, so that we've actually got time for plenty of your questions and answers to those questions as we go through the session. In terms of answering questions, what you can feel free to do at any time is put your questions into the chat, and we'll either answer them then or we'll review those at the end of the session. Because we do have a larger group of people, it's probably easier than asking people to unmute their microphones. So if you just want to type them into the chat as and when they pop up, that would be cool. So yeah, without further ado, let me introduce myself. About me, you can see I've got a picture of China in the background. I know I don't look that Chinese. I actually lived in China for around 6 years though. The city that I first lived in China, previously nobody had ever heard of it. Now I think you've probably all heard of it. It's a city called Wuhan, known for, of course, you know, its famous lakes and this little thing called coronavirus, which apparently broke out from there. While I was in China, I got to work with some really big and interesting companies. So I got to work at very large scale, very complex projects and, you know, just, you know, really interesting challenges. So just two, you know, very brief things to tell you, to give you an idea of the scale of China. In China, they have 12 million blind people. They have 12 million deaf people. And New Zealand, obviously, our population is like 5 million. So China has 2.5 times the amount of deaf people and blind people as we have our total population. So I found that quite interesting. And to go on from that, when I was working with some of the organizations in China, I was quite surprised by their scale. And I remember once I was talking with the head of research and development at Huawei, and I asked, how big is Huawei? And he said, at the moment, we have around 70,000 full-time developers and around 10,000 contractors. And to put that in perspective for you, my hometown is Martinborough in the South Wairarapa. You probably know it for its wine. Maybe around 1,500 people, maybe 2,000 on a weekend. So just the scale of things in China is really, really different. And then I moved back to New Zealand about 5 years ago because I was starting a family, and I thought, you know, in terms of like, you know, air quality, food quality, things like that, New Zealand's a pretty good place to be. So yeah, just a little bit about me, and then I will pass you over to Bartwin just to introduce himself.
Yes, hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Bartwin van der Pol, so you can immediately tell that it's not a typical Kiwi name. In fact, it's not even a typical Dutch name. You might think that this is the family house I grew up in, but it's definitely not. Thanks, Jake, for putting that together. But we are known for tulips and of course windmills and other things that we won't mention in this presentation. Come from the Netherlands. I was a business owner myself, so a lot of working experience in that. Coach and trainer, of course, as well, and consultant for companies, helping them with communication in teams, helping governments in establishing better projects and better outcomes of those projects, and large-scale companies such as large international banks on how to battle this thing that they call agile implementation. And then had the opportunity to join New Zealand just before the first lockdown, so we were just super lucky to get that sorted. In fact, I think our container stuff came 3 days before the first lockdown, so we were very, very lucky. Happy to be here, and I've joined various companies already in New Zealand to help them, support them, and super keen on sharing all my insights and experiences for the training course.
Awesome, thank you, Bartwin. So yeah, well, let's get into it, and just one more thing to add. So we're on a little bit of a mission to make software great again. And in fact, you can probably cross out the again work, because I think for a long time, things haven't worked out as we expected. And, when I go and talk to people, most of them haven't spent their whole life working on highly successful projects that have delivered massive amounts of value. In fact, it tends to generally come from the other extreme. A lot of people have spent a lot of time working on things that take a long time to get delivered, that aren't of the quality that they expect, that just not delivering the value that they're after. And so our goal as a team, as an organization, is to help people deliver more value. At Surety in particular, we work with people on a whole range of different areas, helping them on digital transformations, helping them improve people capability, helping them improve software quality, helping them just improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the way that they deliver. And so that's really the big mission that we're on, and that's sort of a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. How do we make software great? So to give a little bit of context around that, every year there is an interesting report that comes out. It's called the Standish Report, and it talks about the typical usage of features in a software system. And they do this assessment every year where they look at 2,000 projects, 1,000 different companies, and they say, what are people actually using? And this is really interesting to me because if you look at an average project, they talk about the always, often, sometimes, rarely, or never used features. And on average, around 7% of features are always used. So if you think about your smartphone, that might be making phone calls. It might be sending emails, right? Those are the features that you use every day or multiple times a day. If you go into the often used features, so you're not using them every day, but you're using them multiple times per week, maybe you can think of your camera or Bluetooth, or, different people have got slightly different use cases. But anyway, it's about 13% of features that are often used. And if I skip over sometimes or rarely used features, then they went to the never used features. And in this survey that came out, what they said is around 45% of features are never used. Right. And the first time I heard that, I almost started crying because I knew how much of my life I had spent working on those 45% of never used features. And that is just complete and utter waste. And let's be honest, we know that we've all been involved in projects that have contributed to this. And I think it's something as project managers, we should be empowered to challenge as well. And so what we're going to talk about today is how we can challenge that effectively, how we can work effectively as a project manager in those kind of environments. So first, let's talk about what is Agile, right? And there's a lot of discussion out there in the world about, hey, what is Agile? Some people say, hey, we've got post-it notes. That means we're Agile. We've got velocity. We've got squads. Squads is the latest buzzword. Everyone's got squads now, right? We're doing safe. We've got sprints. We've got story points. We've got whiteboards, tribes, stand-up meetings, right? Release trains, user stories, sprint reviews. That means we're Agile. But the reality is, none of these things will make you Agile. None of those things will give you the results that you're looking for. Those are all means to an end, right? But a lot of the time, what happens is organizations do a kind of checklist activity where they say, hey, we've got post-it notes, check. Okay, we're 10% Agile. Now we've got post-it notes and we've got tribes. That means we're 20% Agile. But this is a really big myth. And I think a lot of the time project managers get stuck into these environments and they're told, hey, we work in an Agile way in this place. You go and sort that out for us, without actually being given any information or support around what that actually means or how that works or operates in real life. So that's what we want to do, and that's what we do through the course. That's what we want to do in today's webinar. So let's talk about that. So I want to introduce you to our Agile Project and Delivery Management course. And really what this is a set of pragmatic principles for project managers. How do you work effectively in an Agile environment? And what we really want to talk to today is firstly understanding what is the changing role of project managers in Agile. So as a project manager, how do you work effectively in Agile environments? We'll talk about systems approaches and systems thinking, and I'm sure this is something you've probably heard of or are familiar with, but there is a very big focus on this for project managers in Agile environments. We'll talk about supportive leadership. Some people talk about servant leadership. We quite like this term, supportive leadership. And we'll talk about how project managers can support people through the way that they lead. And we'll look at understanding and delivering value with Agile. So firstly, what is value? And secondly, how do we make sure that that is what we're delivering? Because a lot of the time, the environments that we're used to, we're given a project brief, we deliver that project brief, and that's the end of it. But that's often that 45% of never used work. And I know from my own experience from talking with other project managers, that's a big frustration. We'll talk about some ideas around facilitation and coaching. So how do you be effective as a project manager? I think these are really critical skills that contribute to that. Continuous improvement approaches. So regardless of the agile method that you use, this concept of continuous improvement is really important. And I think the project manager, as someone who is a little bit further back from the work, is often a really useful person to be able to provide some perspective on this. Some key takeaways that you'll get away if you go through this course for us, or ideally that you might get out of the webinar as well, and then some next steps. And the challenge for Bartwin and I is to do this in 50 minutes or less. So with that challenge in mind, let's get to it. Okay, so first thing to talk about is changing roles. What is the role of a project manager in an agile environment? And I see here there is a question that's come through, so I'll just get to that. This is from Murray, and he said, is it advantage to be PMI certified project manager before completing this Agile Project and Delivery Management course? Honestly, Murray, I would say it doesn't make a difference. And the reason is what is covered in the PMI certified project management versus this course, kind of, I won't say two completely distinct skills, but they are focused on different areas. So obviously experience as a project manager is of course useful. It gives you additional context. But whether or not you're certified through PMI, I would say it's not critical to making the most out of this course. So let me get into then the changing role, right? What is different then? Because, you know, this kind of goes into this question quite well. So there is different areas of responsibility if you're a project manager in an agile environment. And there is a big focus on maximizing value. And I think this is one of the big shifts that we see for when we move from, you know, sort of traditional ways of working to agile ways of working. For project managers in particular, is a big focus on maximizing value. So how do we do this? What does this look like? So the first bullet point I've got here is helping understand and deliver value. So a lot of the time when I go and talk with teams, when I go and talk with organizations, when I go and talk with project managers, and I ask them, what is the purpose of this work? What is the value of this work? They don't have the tools to answer that question, right? They've been told this is what needs to be delivered, but they're often not empowered to actually challenge what is the value that it delivers. And so for organizations that are seeking to, you know, adopt more of an agile approach, one thing that I've seen that has led to a lot more success for project managers, for teams, and for the organization is empowering project managers to actually start asking those questions around what is value, and making sure that we're delivering that value on a frequent basis so that we can actually get that feedback, learn, and improve. And again, this goes back to the advantage of the project manager not being directly in the team doing the work. They can actually stand back, look a little bit objectively at things, and then start asking some of those questions around what is value, right? Ideally, we're saying no to that 45% of never used work. Going on from that, the next thing in terms of the change of role is supporting the team, right? So, you know, traditionally as a project manager, we've got our project plan and we're trying to hold the team to account on that plan. How we hold the team to account in an agile environment tends to change a lot, right? So we want to step back, we want to ask questions, we want to, you know, cause them to continuously improve as they go through the process, but we're focused a lot more on creating an environment that is conducive to team productivity than just trying to, you know, sort of manage a timeline. So we create an environment that enables them to be productive. It enables them to grow as they go through the process, right? Act as a buffer to the outside environment. And this is something I would say this is true for a good project manager, regardless of what context they're working in. A lot of the time when I talk about the role of a project manager, and excuse my language, but I describe them often as a shit umbrella, right? They keep the badness away from the team. They keep the distractions away from the team. They enable the team to focus on their work to enable them to be more productive. Right? So you want to enable the team to concentrate on what matters. And you also want to, hear me still? Yep, okay. Act as an interface to enable the team to focus on what really matters, right? And then coordination, right? And there's multiple elements that are involved in coordination. So communication, right? So when you've got external stakeholders, when you've got external users, whoever it is, often the project manager steps in and acts in some kind of communication role. And I see there's a couple of questions that have come through. I will answer those questions just when I get to the end of the slide. Reporting, right? So like I said, reporting tends to be a big challenge for organizations that are adopting Agile. And honestly, I think project managers often absorb the brunt of that because they're the ones that are told, hey, this is what we need, this is when we need it, just do it, right? And in fact, a lot of the time what you see is organizations that end up running a model where they have to report in two different ways at once. They're reporting for the old style and they're reporting for the new style. And that is waste. But I think as a project manager, asking the questions around, hey, what is it that we're really trying to measure? How can we get that information across to you? Next is governance. And governance is, again, a really big shift when we work in Agile. So probably you're familiar with the old like red, amber, green sort of, status reports. This is how we're going. This is what's on track. This is, at risk. This is failing, whatever way that you describe it. In Agile, what we're focused on is continuous feedback. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But essentially, we want to create an environment where we can get continuous feedback. And that means feedback from our development team. It means feedback from our stakeholders. It means feedback from our users. And it means feedback from our customers, right? And again, the project manager is often a person that is very well placed to address that. And then, of course, just overall change management. The project manager is that person that's a little bit stepped back, that can understand potentially the impact of the changes, or at least be communicating with people about the impact of the changes. And I don't mean that they're doing all of this work by themselves. What I mean is at least that they have the view and are making the team aware of what needs to be done. So let me get to these questions that have been put in here. So first from Luke, I did this course in 2017. Is the course changed since then that I should do it again? Yes, so let me talk about that actually. So this course is certified with an organization called the International Consortium for Agile. And in 2019, they rewrote the learning objectives that are required from this course. Not completely rewrote, but there was some that they'd taken away, and there's a bunch of additional things that have been added to this course in terms of what is required to make it meet that, certification mark. So I would say it's probably about, let me say, I'm just going to pull a number out of my backside loop, and I will say 40% different from 2017. So it's not completely different, up to you depending on your experience, but it has changed quite significantly. And then Indra asked a question. Can you speak a little bit about the role boundaries between an Agile project manager and a Scrum Master? This is a very good question, and I'm going to answer it with a it depends, because honestly, every organization does it a little bit differently. A lot of the time, what I'm seeing is project managers are being put into the Scrum Master role, as well as all of the other things that are required for them to be operating as an effective project manager. So some organizations do that, and I would say that's actually really common. Whether or not that's the best result, honestly, it works for some, it doesn't work for others. On the other side, I've seen organizations where there is a much more distinct boundary. And in those contexts, typically what you'll find is the project manager is focused at a level up from what the Scrum Master is focused, right? So the Scrum Master is focused on optimizing the team. The project manager is focused more on value delivery. And like I said, some of these coordination elements, right? Communication, reporting, governance, change management, buffer to the outside environment. And although these are things that obviously Scrum Masters contribute to, I would say that there is, a bit of a difference in how those are addressed. And there's much more of a focus for a project manager for these things. And then one more question from John. Where do you see the BA and PO being part of the same team? If yes, how does their role differ? Does it overlap? So, I mean, that's a fair question. Internationally, I would say a lot of business analysts rising into a product owner role. I think a BA is often acting as a support person to a product owner. And I think both of them deliver value. The analysts obviously tend to get into a lot more detail than the product owner, but in order to be effective as a product owner, I think you need to be able to step back and have the view of stakeholders, development team, customers, users, etc., to enable you to understand value.
So if I may chime here, Jake, I think it's a great question when you talk about responsibilities and roles between Scrum Master and Project Manager. And the first thing I want to call out is that we started this presentation by stating project management in agile environment. So agile environment, that is kind of a loose term, if you will, or very dependent. I think that's the better word, very dependent on the maturity of the organization you're working in. Meaning what step of maturity you're at depends and influences also how that role is being played out. So a project manager is oftentimes much more involved, has that seat at the table at the management level, and should be in the role and responsibility to challenge management to say which project would actually deliver the most value to our company and help them establish that value, as we will uncover a bit later on. Whereas the Scrum Master, I've always found to be more involved with that team level, making sure that it supports that team in optimizing the delivery of value.
And I like, sort of Luke added a comment here. I think the value of Agile project managers is we get a seat at the table. Plus, working at a higher level using the Agile mindset is a unique and powerful skill. Some people out there, especially in Scrum, have this mindset. There is no such thing as project management in Scrum. But you're right, at the higher level, it's always there. It's an exciting role. And I think that's a really good and fair comment.
Yes, and so that's the whole maturity step that we're looking for, to say, where are you at as an organization in adopting Agile ways of working, or the Agile mindset, if you will, and how can we translate that best into the abilities that we have in the people.
And the project manager's role definitely evolves as you go through the process.
Yes.
So let's get on. So next thing, managing the system, not the people. And again, I think this is a really big difference in how Agile project managers run versus traditional project management. So what is it? Focusing on optimizing the system, trusting, and then in brackets, but verify that people are getting the work done. My first point here says moving from managing utilization to managing flow. And I want to give you an example to illustrate this. So utilization is something we're often told is a key target, right? We want people to be 100% utilized. The example I want to give you, what happens if a road is 100% utilized, right? It's a traffic jam. So if a road is 100% utilized, it's a traffic jam. The same thing happens with the work that we do in our organization. So if the people that are doing the work are 100% utilized, all it takes is anything at all to go wrong, and then we'll have a massive traffic jam. Trust me, I lived in China for a long time. They had traffic jams that were thousands of kilometers, weeks long over there, right? They really know traffic jams, right? And so instead, what we want to focus on is increasing efficiency, increasing throughput. So what we want to do is to find the ideal point where we can maximize the flow of work through our system. Now, this is a really big topic that I would love to talk about it a lot more. We don't really have the time, but anyway, it's something that we talk about a lot in the course.
And
but
I
just
think
sorry,
Jake, what I want to add to that is, so it's a great example to talk about utilization of the road, but also in the light of optimizing the capacity that people have, so the talents that people have. So if the whole road is being used by cars, it doesn't matter whether you are a granny who has very limited driving skills, maybe, or Lewis Hamilton, the multiple world champion in Formula One. If the system isn't supportive to it, you will never get the maximum output of the talents that people might have.
Okay, so next, remove blockers and organizational impediments. Again, back to Luke's point, you have a seat at the table. You can actually see what those systemic impediments are, and you can start to remove those impediments. The people are in the team that doing the work, they're too close to the problem, and often they don't have access to the right people to be able to remove those issues. So as an Agile project manager, actually raising and removing or facilitating the removal of those organizational improvements is a really big change that needs to happen. Guiding and coaching lean and agile principles, right? So helping the team and honestly helping the organization advance in their maturity. If you go through a course like this, you'll probably know more than the vast majority of people that are working in your organization about how to work with Agile. And so sharing that experience and helping the organization develop its maturity, I think is a really important part. Measuring what matters. What you measure determines the behavior you get. And there is a question here from Indra. What are the typical KPIs for an Agile PM? I have a long list. Again, I don't really have enough time to get through them as part of this call, but I think it's a really essential part that we do talk as part of the course. And there is something that I'll reference you to, and in fact, I've got something about that on a future slide called evidence-based management. And it talks a little bit more about how do we manage for value. So if you Google evidence-based management, you'll find a really good guide that talks about some example metrics and measurements you can use for understanding value. And then the last point here, create an environment of psychological safety. So I'm not sure if you've all seen it before or not, but there is a really good report from Google, of all people, called Project Aristotle. And basically what they did is a very large research project around what leads organizations to be more successful, right? They got a bunch of organizational psychologists. They interviewed teams from all over Google, which we'd probably typically think of as a reasonably high performing organization. And they found the number one thing for high performance, bar none, number one thing is what they talked about is psychological safety, right? So giving people the environment where they feel free, comfortable, trusted to try new things, learn things, and to be honest about what they discover, right? So if they find quality issues, for example, they will actually call those out. So there is a lot more that you can read about there. If you look up Google's Project Aristotle, you'll find a lot more information. But to me, this is a really big thing that an Agile project manager can be a huge part of, right? Creating that safe environment. Next is adaptive planning, right? And so regardless of the Agile approach that you use, all Agile approaches are focused on this idea of responding to feedback over following a plan. Of course, the big myth is that Agile means no planning, and that's simply not true. Agile means that we design plans that are easy to adjust because plans always change, right? Typically how this happens in our traditional environment is a change request. And let's be honest, no one loves change requests. It's not good for the customer. It's not good for us as project managers. It's not good for the value that they receive. And so this is something that we need to change. And of course, there's lots of elements around how we do that. Regular feedback through sprint reviews, right? We want to be engaging our stakeholders to understand what really matters to them, make sure we're delivering the right thing at the right time. We want to inspect and adapt working software or products. We're not just giving them a status report. We're showing them, hey, what is the value that we've delivered? Is it actually the right value, or do we need to change based on what we've discovered? We need to adapt plans based on feedback. So when we hear this feedback from our stakeholders, from our customers, from our users, from the business, whoever it is, we can adjust our plans. We should always be asking that question, what is the next most valuable piece of work? And I want to arm all of you as project managers with this question, right? What is the next most valuable piece of work? And in fact, what is the value of this piece of work? And if we don't know the value of the work, either find out what the value is or don't do it. If it's really that valuable, you'll soon understand what the value is. And what we want to do then ultimately is to shorten that feedback loop so we can gather that feedback, learn and improve as quickly as possible, right? I always talk about failing quickly and cheaply so that we can learn rather than failing in our traditional approach, failing slowly and expensively. And then ultimately, it's learning and improving as a team. So you might think about things, for example, as a sprint retrospective. And again, as a project manager, this is something that we contribute heavily to in terms of that continuous improvement as a team. The value we have delivered. So there's a question from Indra again. What artifact can be created to show this value we have delivered? Could you point us towards any templates, please? Yes. So I mentioned before this thing called the evidence-based management. If you look up evidence-based management, it talks about 4 key areas of value, and I think I might have some on an upcoming slide. But essentially, if you go look at evidence-based management, it gives you 4 key areas and then a number of metrics you can measure to understand those areas. So I'll share that link with you guys at the end of the presentation. Okay, next point here, supportive leadership. So what is supportive leadership, right? Success is measured by the growth and success of others. We influence individuals and teams to take greater responsibility for actions and outcomes. We lead without using authority or force. People choose to follow, and we inspire others to higher greatness. And again, I think good project managers already have these skills to a large extent. When I've been working in very traditional environments, this is what a good project manager looks like, but the focus is even more emphatically on this when we're working in agile teams, when we're working in agile environments and agile organizations, right? So what do we need to do? We need to encourage teams to self-organize. We need to empower them to self-organize. We need to give them that element of safety so that they can actually feel comfortable to try things, right? Self-organization, for example. Teach the team to lead themselves, coach and guide the team on ways to remove their own impediments. For example, teaching the team to write their own IT tickets or user stories rather than writing the tickets or user stories for them, right? So give them the tools to take responsibility for themselves. You know, I'm sure the people that have come on this call with us are not the kind of project manager that micromanages, but I'm sure you're also familiar that there are a lot of people that would just want to do everything for the team to enable them to get everything delivered. That leads to sometimes short-term wins. It doesn't lead to long-term increases in productivity. And often, in fact, that leads to burnout for project managers. So where we can empower the team leads to better results.
Yeah, I want to chime in at this point, just to state that we're talking about things as stakeholder management. We're also talking about collaboration between a Scrum Master and a project manager, and the inclusion of the team when we set a framework, if you will, to talk about the why, what, and how. And I've often found with clients that they would solely focus on the how and just a bit of the what, and leave out the why and the majority of the what, meaning so the value of the project here, how are we going to work together, what can I expect from you, what is fair to expect the other way around, and how are we going to establish that in an iterative manner.
And then lastly, observe the interactions of the individuals, pose questions, don't offer solutions. And again, I think this is a really great strength of a project manager. We are stepped back from the team. We're removed enough that we can often see what the problems are. But rather than solving them on behalf of people, if we can ask questions and then get them to reflect, actions that they decide by themselves are far more likely to be followed through with and are more powerful for them because they have learned from their own experience. Right? So next is around delivering value. And we did speak about this already. Ensuring that the value of work is understood and ensuring that the team is always working on the next most valuable work. And I mentioned that evidence-based management before. This is where I had my notes in here to talk about this. So there's 4 areas of value that are talked about as part of evidence-based management. Current value, which means what is the value we're currently delivering. Unrealized value is the value that could be delivered by meeting all of the potential needs of our customers or users. Ability to innovate measures the ability to deliver a new capability that might better meet that customer need. And then time to market, right? How quickly can we actually deliver whatever it is that we're working on? A question here from Luke. What is your advice on working with multiple agile teams on a project? Weekly huddles with key project leaders? I would say more frequent to a point is valuable. What I've seen is typically maybe 2 to 3 times a week, having something like, people refer to it as a scrum of scrums, a team huddle, whatever you want to call it. But you know, what is the maximum amount of time that you want to go without discovering that something has changed, right? Because all of the teams are learning as they do their work. I find typically 2 or 3 times a week, right? If it's 2 times a week, typically Tuesday or Thursday. If it's 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that way, as we're learning, as we're going through the process, we can share those insights with other teams, and we can also share, hey, what is the impact of what we've discovered? Right.
And I'm guessing if you're talking about multiple agile teams, it's presumably a bigger piece of work. So it would be good to get kickoff sorted, the timeline sorted, just to get everybody on the same page where we're going for next.
Measure value delivered. I kind of talked about that. Gathering feedback on value delivery. I talked about that. Continuously improve processes as you go, right? So it's not that we just maintain the same state throughout the process. We actually want to learn as we go throughout the process, right? Where we find problems, we want to talk about them. We want to try experiments to improve them. So I'll be honest with you, for us doing this webinar today, this is an experiment, right? We think this is a good way to get our message out, to enable people to learn a little bit about what we do, and ideally give you a few new tools to work in your environment. And so doing these experiments on a regular basis enables us to learn and improve as well. And then focus on maximizing value inside of your constraints, right? Every organization has different constraints. I don't care how good or how bad the organization is, there is always some constraints that need to be dealt with. But inside of those constraints, how do you maximize value, right? Facilitation and coaching. This to me is, again, a big change that I see happening for PMs in an agile environment is this development of facilitation and coaching skills, right? So supporting the team how they need to be supported, challenging and inspiring the team, and providing an external perspective, right? How do we do this? Well, there's different elements to it. So first is just supporting whatever agile process the team is using. And again, a lot of the time you might be actually acting in something like a Scrum Master role. A lot of the time you might be the person that has the most, agile awareness. So where you can support that, that's helpful. Creating that culture of continuous improvement, right? Enabling the team to learn and improve as they go. Knowing your options, because there is multiple things you can choose to do based on the situations you encounter. Sometimes you might want to describe what good looks like, right? Pointing north. Sometimes you might want to take action. Sometimes, and I really like this one, people always forget about it, we can actively do nothing. We can say, in this situation, I'm going to let the team figure it out for themselves. We can coach, we can facilitate, right? But there is a lot of tools in our arsenal as project managers. How do we deal with these situations? We take time, sorry?
Yeah, so I wanted to point out the actively doing nothing. I thought first time I saw that, like, finally, my way of working has been defined. Just kidding. But I do find that in project management, especially when you get around deadlines or things are not progressing in the manner that you would like it to be, that it's difficult for project managers to not step in and try to influence things. So it's critical, I guess, in this course that we talk about this and give you tools and practices on how to execute that in real life.
Taking the time to reflect, right? Like I said, the project manager has the benefit of being a little bit removed from the work of the team. So you do have this opportunity to reflect and then share that reflection with the team. Creating an environment of optimal productivity. And honestly, what this looks like, every team is a little bit different, but focus on wherever you discover those bottlenecks, wherever you discover those challenges, what can we do to improve, right? Which leads nicely into the next stage around continuous improvement. So what is that? Guiding, inspect, and adapt loops, right? That, build, measure, learn, however you describe it. Finding the bottlenecks and fixing them, or giving the team the tools to fix them. And then reflecting regularly on how to learn and improve, right? How do we do this? Again, there's lots of different things we can try. Supporting retrospectives and follow-up actions, right? If the team have come up with an action, do they want us to help hold them to account? Do they want us to help, focus on those actions, right? This idea of not just do, but do, measure, learn, right? So, okay, we build the work, we look at, is it delivering the value? Or we try something in our team, is it deliver value? And then we learn based on what we discover. Bias towards action, encourage the team to implement action-oriented goals. So when they're talking about problems, okay, we understand the problem. What are the actions we could take that will potentially improve or solve this problem, right? Help the team reflect on what is slowing them down, right? You don't need to do all of this for them, but at least causing that reflection. And then sharing ideas that prompt them to take action, right? So I think these are all things that are really important for the role of a project manager. So I guess, what does a project manager's role description look like in an agile environment? And I'm just going to share a poll with you very briefly, because I want to hear, what do you think are critical for success for a project manager in an agile environment? So hopefully a poll will pop up for ideally all of you, but I know technology never works that well. But hopefully you get a poll, and I'm just curious to hear, what do you think is critical for success for an agile project manager? So I see we're getting a few votes coming in now. Understanding value is definitely taking an early lead here as well. So 90% of people, in fact, 91, 92. So almost everybody thinks in terms of critical for success is understanding value. I'll share the results of this poll with you afterwards, by the way. I won't keep this all for myself. I'll share this with you on LinkedIn if we can. Next, after understanding value, there's a couple that are sort of, next equal top, working with stakeholders and guiding the team. Both of those are, roughly 50% of people are saying that's, really critical factors, working with stakeholders, understanding the team. Next is the coaching and facilitation skills. That's really interesting. I think a lot of people see that that is part of the future, and then getting into the metrics and measurement, the understanding of the agile approaches, agile processes, and then approaches to agile governance, right? So this to me is like the sort of the formation of your personal development backlog. So for you thinking about, hey, what are my steps from here? How are you going to learn more about understanding value? How are you going to learn more about guiding the team? How are you going to learn more about working with stakeholders? So my personal approach to this, I have a personal development backlog, and every time someone suggests an idea to me, something that will help me learn, I put it in my personal development backlog, and then every week I take 2 actions that I think are going to help me learn and improve, right? So whether or not you choose to go on the course with us, I don't mind how you choose to learn about it. But what my challenge is to all of you is, for the things that you have identified that are critical for success, how are you going to help yourself learn and grow in each of those areas, right? And that's pretty much sort of what we wanted to talk about. Sort of key takeaways of what you get out of the course if you go ahead and do it with us is understanding the role of the project manager in the agile environment, understanding and measuring value and other key metrics like we've discussed. Understanding value is really important. You'll get an overview of those sort of popular agile methods, Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, which tend to be by far the most popular in New Zealand. Some ideas around agile approaches to governance, and then obviously hand in hand with that is understanding and managing risk. Agile release planning and iterative incremental approaches, working effectively with stakeholders through Agile, a little bit of a look of what Agile reporting looks like, and then how to help organizations, teams, and individuals be successful with Agile. So that's sort of what we get out of it. And then, just in summary, yes, questions, comments, contact us. So you've got my email address, you've got Bartwin's email address. We're both very open at any time. And then one more thing, because we want to say thank you to all of you for joining us on this call. There is a discount code here, Assurity APDM, Assurity Agile Project Delivery Management, that's what it's short for. If you enter that, you'll get 25% off our next Agile Project and Delivery Management course, which is coming up on Auckland on May 24th and 25th. So you can just enter that on the Assurity website if you're interested. And again, we can share that with you through LinkedIn after the fact. But getting to questions now, I see we've got a question from Amelia, and then if anyone else has further questions they would like to get into, feel free to call those out. So the question from Amelia is, do you cover managing teams remotely across different time zones? This is always a question that pops up. And so as and when it pops up, yes, we talk about it. The worst team I ever worked with, this is when I was part of quite a large scale transformation, was a team of 7 people, 7 countries, 7 different time zones. And so we definitely talk about those kind of challenges and ways to effectively deal with that. Yep. Any other questions from anyone before we wrap up? And I'm happy to see it's 11:49. We're aiming for 11. The next one that we have scheduled is scheduled as an in-person course, but we have done this course online before, and I'm sure we will schedule it on time again. Okay, thanks. I assume that might be Leon Elmeritz, I'm just guessing. But anyway, thanks for joining us, and see you next time. And then any other questions before we wrap up? Was there any other questions, Cass, that came through that we missed?
Cheers. Have a good one. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, bye.
No, I think you've covered all the questions.
Okay, wait, there was one that came through from Indra. Can you speak about what not to do as an Agile PM? I'll say honestly, it's the same things that you should not be doing as a traditional PM, like micromanaging too much, focusing too much on the plan, not enough on the value, focusing on, I call like local optimization. So we're focused on just little elements of the system rather than the system itself. So we might optimize a small area, but we forget about actually there is a much bigger problem that if we address would make a huge difference to how we work as a team. I don't know, Bartwin, you've got anything you'd add to your list of like what not to do?
Well, I guess the number one thing I would call out is blame it on Agile. Meaning, my project's not delivered, that is due to the fact that we're working Agile, or we can't measure anything because it's Agile. So I think what's great in this course that we focus quite a bit on setting those measurements in, and especially when you're talking about value, I have some great stories to share about setting key value indicators per team or per project, and how that has helped give the focus to the delivery of projects.
Awesome. Well, I think that might be it for the questions. It looks like they have all come through. So yeah, just again, I really want to thank you for your time. As I say, there is our email addresses. So if you do have any more questions, anything you'd like to share, feel free to reach out. I think we'll be able to post this video to the LinkedIn to everyone who signed up, and we'll put that discount code in there if any of you are interested in that course as well. And hope to catch you on a course or see you around somewhere soon. If you ever want to catch up for a coffee, shoot us a message, and we look forward to chatting with you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you all.
Cheers.
But what's the string that's hitting like